We begin tonight with the January 6th committee. The House panel has postponed a hearing originally scheduled for tomorrow. The committee says the postponement is in response to Hurricane Ian, which is expected to hit the west coast of Florida late Wednesday night. It also said they will announce soon a new date for the hearing. We're joined tonight by two of my colleagues. Congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane is on Capitol Hill, and political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns is in Raleigh, North Carolina, out on the campaign trail. Scott, I want to begin with you because there's been a bit of activity there this afternoon. Just in the last 2 hours or so, we've learned they're postponing this hearing. Is this about losing the headline space to a storm, or is there something else afoot that's causing the members of this committee to rethink whether it made sense to hold a hearing tomorrow?
Well, Ed, in their statement announcing the postponement, they were quite clear. This is in respect to the hurricane hitting. At about the same moment, they were supposed to gavel in this hearing. That is not a type of side-by-side image you want to have if you're a congressional committee. They postponed it, but they haven't announced a date certain for the new hearing. This was potentially the finale from this committee, a long-awaited finale. We'll have to wait a bit while longer. Here's the thing, though. There's a very narrow space in which to try to reschedule this hearing. We're, at this moment, 6 weeks out from the midterm elections. This committee expires at the end of the calendar year. This is a very narrow needle they'll have to thread to get this thing back on the calendar, and there's no certainty they can.
And again, I mean, understandable with the storm, especially given that one of the members, at least one of the members, Stephanie Murphy's from Florida, and her district potentially in the path of at least the remnants of this. But it does seem interesting that in the last few days, members of this committee at least have been a little quieter than they've been ahead of other hearings, trying to give us a sense of what was coming. Was there a sense that they perhaps didn't quite know what they wanted to do yet, or were they set on a plan and they just have to wait?
That's an interesting question because we really don't know what's been postponed because there was no roadmap or order of show for this hearing. So we don't know what we're not getting tomorrow. That's not characteristic of this committee. Usually they have a plan that they've announced days in advance, a witness list, or a sense of the theme or focus of this hearing. They didn't have one. When we spoke to committee members late last week, we asked them for it. They still didn't have one, perhaps making it easier to pull the trigger on a delay because we don't know what they've delayed. All that being said, there was a different calculus potentially to this hearing, Ed, because it had the potential of being the last one, raising the stakes, but also raising the threshold of how they get everything in. This really was potentially a last vehicle through which to show their work, show what they've found, report out some of the hundreds of interviews they've done and the thousands of documents they've collected, including all the interviews done and all the documents collected since the last time we saw this committee weeks ago.
You spoke this afternoon with the director and producer of a documentary about Roger Stone. One thing that we do think was set to be included in this hearing, correct?
Yeah, we figured out some of what was going to be in tomorrow's hearing through our reporting. We spoke with the Danish documentarian whose forthcoming movie, this committee subpoenaed. And the documentarian told us there was an expectation they'd show a clip of it tomorrow at the hearing. This is a documentary about, among other things, Roger Stone. Roger Stone on and before election night 2020. Let me let the filmmaker tell you a little bit more. You shared some of your recording with the House January 6th Select Committee. Could you tell what part of this they were interested in?
Yes, I mean, their focus was, it was pretty clear from the get-go. Their focus was the connections between Roger Stone, the Oath Keepers, and the Proud Boys. That is, the groups that were spearheading the attacks on January 6th.
And there are those names again. We keep hearing them in the January 6th Select Committee's investigation. Oath Keepers and Proud Boys, investigating whether there's a nexus between those groups and Roger Stone, somebody who was in the former president's orbit. We know from the court cases involving the Oath Keepers that, according to the prosecutors, the Oath Keepers exchanged messages while here at the Capitol January 6th or ahead of January 6th about the possibility of providing protection, security for Roger Stone. That was one trajectory of this committee hearing tomorrow. But again, we don't know what else they had planned.
And haven't there been some legal developments with the Oath Keepers, Scott?
Yeah, one would say that. Their trial began this morning. Jury selection for the first 5 accused Oath Keeper seditious conspirators to go on trial. That includes the founder, perhaps the best known of this group, Stewart Rhodes, facing the highest level charges because it is a charge of seditious conspiracy. They're accused of not just coming here January 6th, but of coming here with a plan to disrupt the Congress, block the peaceful transfer of power, help breach security violently, and stage guns outside the city limits for the possibility the former president invoked the Insurrection Act. This jury selection itself will take days, longer than most cases. The trial itself could take weeks, longer than most cases, and it just started today.
Caitlin, to you now on the campaign trail, I don't know about you, but I've found in my midterm year travels that the farther you get from Washington, the less urgency maybe there is, or even familiarity with the ebbs and flows of what went on in Washington, as important and as profound as it is. You had a chance today to speak with one of the candidates in the U.S. Senate contest down there. Tell us a little more, and whether this issue resonates at all.
Yeah, Ed, that's exactly right. We've been wondering, how does this all play into these big key races? Are voters paying attention to the everyday kind of incremental progress that we've seen the committee make? It was really interesting because I asked Sherry Beasley, who is the Democratic Senate candidate running for an open seat here in North Carolina. It's a seat being vacated by a Republican. And she actually said that she is hearing a little bit about this from voters, kind of under the umbrella about democracy, which we've kind of seen reflected in our polling. Take a listen to what she had to say. Are you hearing a lot from voters about January 6th, about the former president's involvement? Is that something that comes up on the campaign trail?
What people are concerned about is that my opponent was in Congress on January 6th, that he caused the mob that stormed the Capitol and put our law enforcement's lives in danger, patriots. They're concerned about the fact that he's an election denier and he's spreading the big lie. They're concerned about the fact that when he's asked now by media whether or not he will accept the results of the 2022 election in November, he will not respond. We need a senator who understands that a free and fair democracy is a part of the foundation of who we are as North Carolinians and as Americans. And I can tell you, I will accept the results of the November 2022 election, and that's what people here in North Carolina want.
Now, she's referring to Congressman Ted Budd, who is her Republican opponent there. And I should note that on January 7th, he did release a statement condemning the attack, but also he voted against certifying the results of the election. And he said that he supported an orderly transition of power, but had questions about the way the election was conducted. So here's an example, a more specific example of a way a Democrat is using this on the campaign. And we've seen Democrats here in the state ahead of former President Trump coming to the state over the weekend here, put a billboard up connecting Budd to statements on January 6th. What's interesting, though, in this race is that Budd is not backing away from Donald Trump at all. He got his endorsement in the primary, which helped boost his showing in that primary and helped earn him the nomination for the Republicans. And he also campaigned with former President Trump on the stage here in North Carolina on Friday night. And the calculus from the campaign is that they need to turn out Republican-based voters. So if Trump can come to a state like this one, even though there are all these investigations going on, even though we have all of this information from various things that we've learned from the committee, that the benefit is getting a big turnout from your base, which could matter, especially in a state like North Carolina, where Trump won, even narrowly, but still won. So it's really interesting to kind of see how this is all playing out. But I'd remind people that the top issue that we're seeing in polling across the country, and especially these battleground states, is that inflation and the economy remain top of mind. And so when you're going to the ballot box, that's likely what you're going to be thinking about. And then, of course, increasingly, the issue of abortion access for some voters. Right,
and it's become a big issue there. But it is interesting to see Beasley double down on the January 6th stuff when other Democrats have run for it by making the point that he was an enabler in essence by voting to support this. Scott, I got to turn back to you real quick because there have been some developments there on the Hill today regarding whether or not the government will shut down. And just a little while ago, Senator Joe Manchin announced he's pulling out of the spending bill, a key thing he wanted done in order to get his support for the Inflation Reduction Act. It's this permitting, this new law that would make getting energy projects permitted faster. He's yanking it out amid Republican opposition. Does that make passing this spending bill now faster and easier ahead of Friday's deadline?
I didn't see a circumstance in which they'd let the government shut down 6 weeks ahead of the midterm elections. Neither side would have benefited from that. This was the last variable, this permitting reform proposal, which would help launch energy projects, especially in West Virginia. And so Joe Manchin was pushing for it, but he has pulled back, recognizing it's not going to pass. It wasn't going to get bipartisan support, not the sufficient amount of support to make it part of this bill to keep the government open. So it appears the government is on a trajectory to remain open till after the election when we fight this battle again in December.
All right, well, that storm may pass. We'll watch the other one, and we appreciate you both, Scott MacFarlane and Caitlin Huey-Burns. Thank you.